Our movie begins with a party in the house of a space pioneer named Loko. The party is in celebration of his upcoming mission to Mars, and Loko's family and friends have gathered at his house to bid him farewell. Among the attendees is Loko's friend, Jake, who was supposed to go on the same mission with him but had to back out due to his wife's health issues. In 2020, the first crewed mission to Mars was launched, and during the journey, NASA discovered a strange white formation on the planet. Scientists believed it to be a layer of water, which was a significant discovery that could aid in future colonization efforts. NASA informed the astronauts about their remarkable discovery and provided them with coordinates to investigate it further. The astronauts went to the location and started conducting their examinations to confirm the nature of the formation. Their radar detected a mountain in the area, which was found to be made of metal. As the astronauts examined the site, they heard a faint sound coming from inside the mountain. When they increased the volume, they couldn't understand the source of the sound, thinking it might be interference from their equipment. Suddenly, the sand beneath them began to move rapidly and started to rise, covering the metal mountain completely. It started to take the form of a strange worm-like creature. Surprisingly, the sand creature appeared to have consciousness and stood in front of the astronauts, seemingly inspecting and studying them. The sand creature attacked the astronauts, killing 3 of them, and emitted an electronic pulse that damaged most of their equipment. After the storm subsided, a metallic statue's face emerged from the sand, with the rest of the statue buried below the surface. NASA received an incomprehensible message from the agency. From the astronaut Loko, it was apparent that he was afraid of an unknown entity, but they couldn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, the communication was cut off, and they weren't sure if Loko was alive or dead. The agency decided to send a rescue mission to Mars. Then, Jim appeared in the picture and proposed a solution to the problem. He explained that when he was part of the mission, he had devised a plan for evacuating Mars in case of any emergency, and his superior had approved it. Jim told them that he wouldn't participate in the rescue mission. However, the astronaut leader insisted that Jim should be part of the rescue mission, and he explained to his superior that Jim had previously declined the mission due to personal circumstances. His superior was convinced by his argument and agreed to let Jim join the mission. The space rescue ship carried 4 astronauts, including Jim, Bodhi's wife Trey, and Phil. The journey to Mars took more than a year, and during the journey, Jim was happy to witness the love between Bodhi and Trey. When the ship approached the surface of Mars, they could clearly see the surface and the previous astronauts' camp. The camp appeared to be intact, but they noticed 3 sand dunes near the camp, which they couldn't understand. Suddenly, an electromagnetic wave covered the entire planet, and the astronauts couldn't see anything. The spacecraft attempted to establish contact with NASA to get landing permission. The agency's director granted them permission, and Bodhi informed Jim that they had received landing clearance. Jim watched a video that showed memories of him and his wife talking about their upcoming trip to Mars and what they would do once they landed on the surface. The person felt pain as they were upset due to their friend's sadness over the separation from his wife. The spaceship began entering the orbit of Mars in preparation for landing, but suddenly a group of small meteorites appeared. One of the meteorites was very precise and penetrated the spaceship's hull, hitting Phil's arm. The hole caused by the meteorite made the spaceship lose some of its oxygen. The hole was so small that they couldn't locate it, but Terry acted cleverly by throwing the liquid from their drinks, and the liquid seeped from the hole, allowing them to identify its location and repair it. However, they didn't know that the meteorites had caused another hole in the fuel line that supplies the main engines of the spaceship. As soon as they started the engines, the fuel ignited, and the fire caught in the leaked fuel due to the hole. This resulted in a massive explosion that destroyed a significant part of the spacecraft. The space explorers had no choice but to put on their suits and exit the spaceship, with their only hope of survival being to reach the supply module left behind by the first stage of the mission. They did manage to find the supply module, but unfortunately, it was in a lower orbit than theirs. Buddy decided to risk his life and went towards the supply module, consuming all of the propellant he had in his suit, taking a rope with him. He succeeded in reaching it and tying it with the rope. However, he couldn't stop himself and drifted away from it, floating in space without the ability to return. Terry tried to save her husband by using the suit's thrusters, but when she saw him drifting away, she realized that she was running out of propellant and couldn't reach him. She decided to sacrifice herself and took off her suit's helmet to prevent it from going to him and save him. Terry cried with great anguish when she saw her husband dying before her eyes, and she saw his lifeless body as it fell on the surface of Mars. The astronauts landed safely on the planet Mars thanks to the supply module. Unfortunately, the supply module couldn't take them back to Earth. However, the astronauts had planned ahead and brought spare equipment from the first spacecraft to replace the damaged equipment. This way, they could return to Earth with the first spacecraft. They started replacing the equipment and then went to the camp of the early space pioneers, beginning to explore it. Strangely, they found everything in perfect condition, and when Jim entered the room with the plants, he saw a reflection of Loko attacking him with an axe. Jim was taken aback and couldn't believe that Loko, his friend, was still alive after all this time. Loko himself couldn't believe it either because he didn't think anyone could come and rescue him. After the astronauts gathered, they noticed that Loko was acting strangely and they asked him about his reaction to Jim. Loko began to tell them his story. He said that after escaping from the sandstorm, he buried his 3 friends in front of the camp. He continued to explain that he spent a long time analyzing the strange statue he had seen and offered to show them a video clip of the statue. His friends couldn't believe their eyes when they saw a human face on a statue on Mars of that size. Loko told them that he heard strange sounds during the last visit and, when he analyzed them, he discovered that they were 3-dimensional drawings resembling nuclear symbols. He believed that an unknown entity had left this as a signature. However, Jim examined the drawing more closely and realized that it wasn't a nuclear symbol. It was a test for humans, a password to the place. They learned that the early space pioneers died because they didn't pass the test correctly, and now they decided to take the test themselves. The astronauts didn't risk their lives but sent an exploration vehicle to the location. They recorded the nuclear acid drawing on the transmission device. As soon as the vehicle reached the statue, it sent a signal using the nuclear acid drawing. The statue responded by lighting up and opening a vertical door. The astronauts, except for Phil, entered to continue repairing the spacecraft. Jim told Phil to take off with the spacecraft after a specified time, even if they didn't return. However, when they entered, they found themselves in a white space, and as soon as the door closed, they lost communication with the spaceship. Strangely, the place they were in resembled Earth's atmosphere. They removed their helmets and began to breathe naturally. A door opened for them, leading to another place. This new place resembled outer space, and they saw 3D images of the solar system. After that, 3D images of a massive extraterrestrial being similar in appearance to humans appeared. The extraterrestrial being told them that it used to live with its kind on Mars until a meteorite impact caused the environmental collapse of the planet. They decided to abandon Mars and spread throughout the universe, joining different star systems. They sent a spaceship to Earth with their genetic footprint. After millions of years, plants and animals in various forms began to appear on Earth. Many years later, different forms of life and nuclear acids started to emerge on the planet. When humans returned to Mars, the statue recognized them because they shared the same nuclear acid with the extraterrestrials. After the extraterrestrial finished speaking, it took the astronauts' hands, and they formed a circle around Earth. The extraterrestrial vanished, and beneath them, a circular portal appeared. This portal was supposed to transport them to a Martian spacecraft that would take them to their destination. Why did the inhabitants of Mars and Phil fix their spaceship and try to contact their friends more than once, letting them know that they were going to move the ship, but unfortunately, they couldn't get through? However, the astronauts managed to hear the warning from Phil, who was warning them that he would move the ship because a sandstorm was approaching and he needed to move it before the storm destroyed the ship. The astronauts had to hurry from their location to return to Earth. However, Jim refused to return with them to the spacecraft and told them that he would go to the new alien planet because he believed in his destiny. This is what he was born for, so they embraced Jim and said goodbye to him. Jim was also bidding farewell, and she gave him a rocket-shaped necklace that belonged to her husband. Both of them went to return to their ship before it moved, and Phil was calling his friends, but no one was answering him, even though he had orders to launch the ship after a certain period. Still, he refused to take off with the ship and decided to wait for them. Jim entered the circular gate, which transported him to the Mars spacecraft, and they went to look for Phil, driving a car in the midst of the storm to reach Phil and get to the spaceship before Phil launched it. Inside the Martian spacecraft, Jim couldn't move, and the water was filling the space around him until it reached his head. Jim thought he was going to drown, but was surprised to find that he could breathe underwater. He smiled and started to recall his memories with his friends and realized that he was facing a new adventure that did not follow the laws of humanity. His friends took off with the ship to return to Earth and saw the Martian spacecraft flying with Jim at an incredible speed, entering a wormhole that would transport it to the alien planet. They wished him a safe and happy journey and hoped he would return to them safely.